The knock that changed everything. Walter lived alone in a small wooden house on the edge of the desert. He was an old man with silver hair and a quiet voice. Every day he fed the birds and fixed broken radios in his dusty workshop. The people in town called him strange but harmless. He did not care what they said. He liked silence and the sound of the wind more than human noise. One evening just before sunset, Walter sat in his rocking chair on the porch. The sky was red and orange as the sun dropped behind the hills. He held a warm mug of tea in his hands. The day had been long but peaceful. Then something strange happened. A knock, soft but urgent. Walter turned his head slowly. No one ever came to his door. He stood and stepped down the porch carefully. His knees ached with every step. He reached the front door and opened it. There she was, a woman, but not a normal woman. She had glowing blue lines across her face and silver hair that flowed like light. Her skin was pale like moonlight, and her eyes were full of fear. She wore torn clothes and had scratches on her arms. Her legs were shaking. Then she collapsed into his arms. Her voice barely came out as she whispered, "Please help me. They will find me." Walter held her. He looked around. The desert was empty. The air was quiet. He brought her inside without a word. He laid her gently on the old sofa. She was breathing hard but still alive. He took a blanket and wrapped it around her. Then he brought her water. She drank it slowly. Her hands were shaking. Walter sat beside her, but asked nothing. He had seen fear before. Long ago during the war, he knew that look in her eyes. After a while, she looked at him. Her voice was weak. "Are you alone? Please tell me you are alone." Walter nodded slowly. "Yes, just me. Always has been." She closed her eyes and leaned back. For a long moment, neither of them said a word. Then Walter spoke softly. "What is your name?" She opened her eyes again. Her lips moved, but she said nothing. Instead, she looked at the window outside. The sky was turning dark. "They are coming. They can smell me. I have to hide." Walter stood. He led her to the cellar door in the kitchen. He opened it and helped her down the stairs. She crouched in a corner. Her body shook with fear. Walter gave her a pillow and an old wool coat. "Rest here. No one will come." He closed the cellar door and sat back in his chair. His heart was beating faster than it had in years. Who was she? What was she? He did not understand, but he knew she needed help, and somehow he felt like this moment was meant to happen that night. As Walter sat beside the fire, he heard something outside. A low hum. Then lights, bright blue lights moving over the hills. He stepped outside. The lights were floating in the sky like quiet stars. Then a loud sound like thunder, but no storm was coming, a ship hovering far above. He felt a chill run through his spine. He went back inside and locked every door in the basement. The woman was silent, but her fear had reached him. Walter stood there in the dark cabin and whispered to himself, "What have I let into my home?" But something inside him said it was the right thing. This was not just about helping a stranger. This was something bigger. He could feel it. He sat by the fire with his old shotgun on his lap. He had not used it in 20 years, but tonight he might need it. Above the cabin the stars were quiet, but trouble was already falling down from the sky, and in his heart Walter knew his peaceful life was over. The knock had changed everything. The morning sun rose over the dry hills as Walter opened his eyes slowly. He had fallen asleep in the chair with his shotgun still across his lap. The fire had gone cold, and the cabin smelled like dust and old wood. He stood up and stretched his arms while his bones cracked softly. Then he remembered the night before. He rushed to the kitchen and opened the cellar door. She was not there. His heart stopped for a second. Then he heard something. In the back room he followed the sound, and there she was. The alien woman was in his small bathroom. She had cleaned her face and tied her glowing hair with an old scarf. She stood in front of the mirror with a towel wrapped around her shoulders. Walter stepped back. She looked at him in the mirror and said, "Nothing. I found soap. I hope it was all right." Her voice was quiet. She sounded like someone who never got permission to speak before. Walter nodded slowly. "Of course, do what you need." She walked past him and sat down at the old table. Walter made 2 cups of tea and placed one in front of her. She wrapped her hands around the warm cup and stared into it. Looked at her carefully. She was not like anything he had ever seen. Her skin was smooth and pale like marble. The glowing marks across her cheek looked like soft blue rivers, and her eyes held a storm. She raised her head and met his gaze. I know what you are thinking. What am I? Why did I come? Why did I fall into your arms? Like a ghost. Walter stayed quiet. She took a deep breath and her voice dropped lower. If I tell you the truth, you may not want to help me anymore. You may throw me outside and call them to take me. Walter did not move. He only said one thing. Trimesh looked down at her hands, then slowly began to speak. My name is Sela. I was born in the stars. My kind comes from a planet you would call Jural. We are not fighters. We were never meant for war, but someone else came, a different race. They took our planet. They turned our homes into factories. They made my people into stock. We were sold, we were labeled, we were tagged for breeding and pain. Walter sat down across from her. His hand gripped the edge of the table. I was taken when I was young. I was sold to a ship called Varnax 8. It travels between worlds, carrying girls like me for profit. They kept me in a cage. They injected me with chemicals. They told me I would be useful once I reached maturity. She looked up again. Her eyes glowed with heat, not anger, but sorrow, deep, endless sorrow. I escaped last month. There was an accident. The ship cracked in the middle of space. I took a chance and launched a stolen pod. I did not know where I would land, but the stars brought me here. Walter's hands were shaking now. He remembered stories his brother once told him. Strange names, secret programs, missing people. Maybe this was what he meant. Sela reached across the table and touched his hand. You helped me without asking anything. Why? Walter did not answer right away. Then he looked at her and said, because someone has to. She smiled for the first time, a small, gentle smile. Her glowing marks pulsed softly like light under water. But danger is still near, she whispered. They never stop hunting, and they have ways of finding me. Walter stood and walked to the window. The road outside was empty, but he knew eyes could be anywhere. He turned to her and asked, what do they look for? How do they track you? She hesitated, then rolled up her sleeve. There on her arm, a strange black mark like a branded, flashes when I get scared. It sends a signal to the one who owns me. Walter stared at it, then reached into the drawer. He took out a knife. Sela flinched, but he said gently, hold still. She nodded. He heated the knife over the stove, then pressed it against the mark. Sela gasped, but did not scream. Smoke rose. The mark burned away slowly. Gone. Walter poured water on her arm and wrapped it in cloth. She looked at him with tears in her glowing eyes. No one has ever helped me before, not like this. Walter did not reply. He stood tall and looked outside again. Then we better prepare, because they will not like what you just did. From the edge of the horizon, a silver glint flashed in the sky. They were coming, but this time Walter was ready. The sun had dropped low behind the hills as Walter stood in the garden with a shovel in one hand. He was digging a long trench beside the cabin. Sweat rolled down his forehead as he worked in silence. Every 10 minutes he stopped to look at the sky. He could feel something watching inside the cabin. Sela sat by the fire with a thick coat around her shoulders. Her glowing marks had dimmed since the night before, but her eyes still moved quickly from door to window. She held a small old book Walter had given her. She could not read English, but she traced the letters with her fingers like they were sacred. Then Walter returned. He set down the shovel and walked into the room. He stared at her for a long second, then spoke in a low voice. I saw movement by the tool shed. Something tall, not human. We need to move fast. Sela stood at once. Her breath caught in her throat. She grabbed her bag and followed him to the back door. Walter opened a hatch in the floor beneath an old rug. Tunnel ran under the house toward the dry riverbed. He had built it during the war as a backup escape. He never thought he would use it again. Now it was their only chance. They crawled through the tunnel. The dirt was cold and tight. Their knees scraped against the ground. Sela's hair caught on the rough wood beams, but she said nothing. When they reached the end, Walter pushed open the hatch. They were behind the shed. He held a finger to his lips and pointed toward the shadows. A dark figure stood 10 feet Away, it was tall, clad in armor that shimmered like oil in sunlight. Its head turned slowly from side to side. In its hand it held a long rod with blinking red lights. Acela pulled back and whispered, "That is a Kvarn seeker. They smell energy if it senses me. It will send the full unit." Walter looked around. He picked up a rusty wrench from the ground. He threw it far to the left. It clanged loud against a broken pipe. The seeker turned and moved in that direction, silent and fast like smoke. Now go. They ran through dry brush and low trees. Their feet hit the earth hard. Branches scratched their faces. Birds scattered into the sky. They reached the old church ruins near the canyon. Walter opened the back door and led her inside. The church had no roof, only stone walls and broken pews. Dust covered everything. They sat behind the altar and caught their breath. Sela placed her hand on her chest. Her pulse raced. Her eyes locked with his. "Thank you again. I owe you more than I can repay." Walter shook his head slowly. "I am no hero, just tired of watching good people suffer." Then a soft hum reached their ears, not from above, from beneath the ground. Sela gasped. "They are scanning for heat. They will find us." Walter pulled out an old device from his jacket. A jammer, something his brother left behind before he vanished. He pressed the button. A blue light blinked once, then faded. The hum stopped. Sela stared at him. "Where did you get that?" Walter replied, "My brother. He worked for something called Project Kestrel. He disappeared 20 years ago. Now I think he knew about your people." Sela's voice trembled. "Your brother. Maybe he tried to help. Maybe they took him." Walter looked away. He had always blamed himself for not searching harder. Suddenly a voice echoed from outside, mechanical and cold. "Step out now. You have been seen. You are harboring stolen property. This is your only warning." Sela's face turned white. Walter stood slowly. He walked to the broken door and shouted back, "She is not property. She is a person. Come take me if you dare." Silence. Then footsteps. Slow, heavy. Walter turned to Sela. "Use the back window. Run to the cabin. Get to the truck. Drive north. There is a ranger station near the cliffs. Wait for me there." Sela grabbed his arm. "No, I will not leave you. You must. Someone has to tell the truth." She pressed her forehead to his for a moment, then slipped through the window and vanished into the trees. The figure stepped through the door. It was twice the size of a man. Its eyes glowed red under a metal mask. Walter raised his shotgun, aiming straight at its chest. The seeker raised its rod, but before it could fire, Walter pulled the trigger. The blast lit the room. The seeker flew back and hit the wall. Sparks flew from its armor. Walter ran out the door, his heart pounding, his breath short. He knew he had only minutes, but he had bought her time above the desert. 3 more ships began to descend. The stars were watching now, and the real hunt had begun. Rain fell across the desert like silver threads from the sky. It had not rained in months. Now the heavens opened as if warning. Something deep and unseen had begun to stir. Sela gripped the steering wheel of the old truck with trembling hands. The cabin was shaking as the wheels bounced across rocks and broken ground. She kept her eyes on the winding dirt path ahead. Behind her the sky was full of light, not from the sun, but from the ships chasing the fire of her freedom. She reached the ranger station by dawn, a lonely building made of stone and wood. It stood against the cliffs like a forgotten memory. She ran inside and locked the door. There were no people, no radio, only silence and old dust. She curled up in the corner with a blanket and waited, her hands pressed to her ears as thunder cracked above the mountains. Every sound made her jump. She did not know if Walter was alive, but in her heart she felt something strong, a warmth she had never known before. He had risked everything for her, not because he wanted reward, but because he cared. Then she looked at her wrist. The band Walter burned off had left a faint scar, but beneath it, a symbol remained, a shape that was not alien. She gasped and sat up. She had seen that mark before, in the prison ship, on a folder with a human face on the cover. A man with the same jawline as Walter, same eyes, same sorrow. She whispered to herself, "No, it cannot be." She dug into her bag and pulled out a small device, a stolen memory cube. She pressed the side, and it lit up. With blue light, holograms flickered in the air. Files Faces records. She flipped through the data until she found it, Project Kestrel Human Intelligence Covert Integration Program. Then she saw the name Commander John Harper. She stared at the face, younger, stronger, but no doubt Walter's brother. Her breath caught. The file said he was lost during infiltration of the Varnax network. He had tried to free captives. He had planted seeds of rebellion. He was betrayed and captured. She felt tears rise, but blinked them back. Her heart ached with the weight of it. Walter had more than helped her. His family had fought for her people long before she fell from the stars. Then a sound outside, footsteps, slow and careful. She grabbed the old rifle from the Maiwa wall and pointed it at the door. It opened. Walter stood there, soaked, bleeding, but smiling. Sella dropped the rifle and ran to him. She wrapped her arms around him. He nearly collapsed, but she caught him. "You are alive," she said with a voice full of tears. "Barely," he replied with a weak grin. She helped him sit down and removed his jacket, a burn on his shoulder, a long scratch across his chest. She began cleaning the wounds with shaking hands. "You could have died. Why did you not run?" "Because you needed me, and I made a promise long ago." She looked at him, eyes full of fire and sorrow. "I know who your brother was. I saw his file. He tried to save us. They erased him from your world, but he lives in my people's memory." Walter closed his eyes. The pain in his body could not match the weight in his heart. He was always the brave one. "I just fixed radios." "No, you are brave too. Braver than most." He opened his eyes and took her hand. "What you saw on that file, does it mean something now?" "Yes, it means your family once lit a fire in the dark, and I will carry it forward." She pulled out the memory cube and showed him. Together they watched images of experiments, captive girls, broken minds, but also names of humans who helped. Walter's brother was one of them. "We are not alone in this fight," she said softly. Walter nodded, then stood slowly with effort. "Then we need to go where the others wait. Where the vault beneath Hollow Ridge. That is where John said he would send the last message if anything happened to him. He said someone like me, someone old, someone forgotten, would be needed when the storm came." Sella looked at him. "You remember that now? I buried it for years, but your voice, your pain, it woke something in me." Packed supplies and left the station. As the sun rose, the storm clouds faded, but far behind them, the ship still moved. Still searching in the distance, Hollow Ridge waited, and the truth buried for decades was ready to rise again. The road to Hollow Ridge was rough and narrow, with sharp stones cutting through the truck tires. Walter drove with one hand while holding pressure on his wound with the other. Sella sat beside him, watching the skies with sharp eyes. They had not seen a ship since sunrise, but the air felt heavy with danger. They reached the base of the ridge by late afternoon. The path ahead was blocked by fallen trees and cracked earth. Walter turned off the engine and stepped outside. He limped as he moved around the truck and opened the back to check their supplies. Sella stepped beside him. Her skin glowed faintly under the sun. She could feel something pulling her toward the ridge, a force like memory or destiny. Walter pointed to a hidden trail that led through the rocks. "That way leads to the old mines. The vault is beneath the deepest shaft." As they started walking, two men stepped out from behind the rocks. Both wore dark uniforms with silver bands on their sleeves. Their eyes were cold, and their hands rested on strange weapons. "You must be Walter Harper," one of them said. "You are with her. We need to talk." Walter placed himself between Sella and the strangers. "What do you want?" The first man stepped forward with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "We are not here to fight. We are here to offer you something. Something generous." He opened a black case and turned it toward Walter. Inside were gold bars and shining alien crystals, enough wealth to change a life forever. "You give her to US. You walk away. No charges, no trouble, just peace and comfort." Walter looked at the gold, then at Sella, then back at the men. "And if I say no, then we take her anyway. And you lose more than just an offer." Sella stepped forward, her voice calm but strong. "You think I am something you can buy? You think he is someone who will sell me?" The second man raised his weapon. "We think he is tired. We think he wants to be free of this." Walter moved like fire. He grabbed the edge of the case and swung it upward. Gold flew through the air. Sela kicked the weapon from the man's hand and knocked him down with a sharp elbow. The other man reached for a signal beacon. Walter hit him with the handle of his knife. The beacon fell and cracked on the rocks. No signal, no call. Both men lay groaning on the ground. Walter pulled their belts and tied them to a fallen tree. He looked at Sela. "We need to move fast." They climbed the ridge with breathless steps. The wind howled between the cliffs. Birds scattered into the sky as if sensing something rising from below. Near the top they reached an old mine entrance. Rusty gates hung open, chains broken, signs lost to time. Inside the tunnel was cold and wet. The air smelled of old oil and forgotten fire. Sela's marks began to glow brighter with each step. "This place remembers," she whispered. "Your brother was here." They followed the tunnel until it opened into a wide chamber. In the center stood a large steel vault with human writing across the top. Project Kestrel Command Memory Core. Walter walked to the panel and placed his hand on the scanner. A beep, then silence. The vault opened. Inside were shelves lined with metal boxes and glowing cubes. A chair sat in the middle with a broken screen still showing faded blue light. Sela stepped in and touched the nearest cube. Images filled the air. A younger John Harper speaking to a camera. "If you are seeing this, then they failed to stop you. You are either brave or desperate. Either way, you are the one who must decide." He spoke of hidden networks, allies in deep space, humans and aliens working together in secret. He spoke of a war coming, a war not of armies, but of truth. The recording ended. Sela turned to Walter with wet eyes. "He died trying to save US, but his voice lives here." Walter placed his hand on the old chair. He closed his eyes. "I see him now. I remember his laugh. I remember how he believed in people, even when they failed him." They gathered the data cubes and placed them in bags, then sealed the vault behind them. As they stepped outside, the sky had changed again. Ships circled above, slow and wide like vultures waiting to land. Walter looked at Sela. "We have no weapons, no army, only this truth. And that is enough," she replied, "because now we are not alone." Far across the ridge, a beacon flashed. Not one of the enemy, but one of the rebels. Someone had heard the signal, and someone was coming to answer. The wind screamed across the top of Devil's Rock like a warning from the stars. The sun had disappeared behind thick red clouds. Walter and Sela stood side by side near the edge of the ridge. Below them, a storm of fire and light gathered in the sky. Enemy ships were landing in waves, dark shapes falling like hunters ready to strike. Sela's hands shook as she checked the signal beacon again. The rebel response was silent. No light, no sound. They were still alone. Walter looked at the valley below. Tense scanners, drones, all searching, all waiting. "They know we are here," said with no fear in his voice. Sela lowered the beacon and stepped closer. "If they capture me again, they will take my memories. They will erase everything. Even you." Walter did not speak. He walked to the edge and stared at the field of lights growing larger by the second. He turned back to her with calm eyes. "Then they will never take you alive." She moved to stop him, but he raised his hand gently. "We still have one choice." Behind them, the old ridge tunnel led into the caves. Inside were hidden pockets of unstable gas. Walter had seen it before during mining. Dangerous, unpredictable, explosive. He pointed toward the cave mouth. "If we go in there and light it, we can bring down the whole ridge." Sela stared at him. "You would die for me. I already lived my life. You still have yours. Maybe what I lost was always meant to be given for something greater." A tear rolled down her cheek. She reached into her bag and handed him a small crystal disc. "This holds the full data of Project Kestrel names. Proof everything you must live. You must give this to the rebels." Walter shook his head. "No, you are faster. You have the eyes of the stars. Take the northern trail. I will cover the exit." He turned and walked into the cave without waiting. Sela stood frozen. Her heart wanted to run after him, but her mind knew he was right. She whispered his name, then turned toward the trail and vanished into the trees. Inside the cave, Walter worked quickly. He set small charges along the wall where the gas was. Thickest old wires, rusty tools, pieces of gear left behind from decades ago. He lit a fuse and connected it to a small power cell. He sat near the entrance with the detonator in his lap. His breath came slow and heavy. Outside, enemy troops moved closer. Their lights swept across the rocks. Voices called in strange languages. They had found the trail. But not her. Walter smiled to himself. He closed his eyes and whispered to the cave walls. "Come on, little brother. Let us do something that matters." One. Last time, far away, Sella ran through the forest. Branches cut her arms. Her lungs burned, but she did not stop. She reached the top of a hill and turned. Devil's Rock stood tall in the distance. A flash, then fire. The explosion lit up the sky like a second sun. The ridge collapsed into itself. Dust and smoke swallowed the enemy. The ground shook beneath her feet. Birds fled. Animals cried. The valley was gone. She fell to her knees. Tears ran down her face, but her hands clutched the disc tight. Against her chest, she whispered, "I will not let you die in vain." The signal beacon lit up, a voice clear and sharp. "This is Rebel Wing 17. We received your code. Identify location." Selah pressed the button and spoke through the tears, "I have the proof. The one who gave it to me is gone. But he gave everything. He was human. His name was Walter Harper." There was silence. Then the voice returned. "We are coming." Selah looked up at the stars. The wind touched her face, warm, gentle. In that moment, she felt something, not just sorrow, not just pain. She felt hope. Walter's sacrifice would echo across worlds. His name would not be lost. As the rebel ship came into view, she stood tall with fire in her heart. He was just an old man till the day he became a legend. The stars over Earth were quiet again. Ships no longer circled the hills. The sky held no fire. Only peace. Selah stood on a raised platform inside the rebel base, hidden beneath the northern mountains. She wore a silver robe with blue lining. Her marks glowed brighter now, not from fear, but from honor. Around her stood humans and aliens side by side. Some wore old uniforms, others wore simple clothes. All of them watched her in silence. In her hand, she held a crystal disc, the same one Walter gave her. Before he vanished into the cave at Devil's Rock, a tall woman with sharp eyes and gray streaks in her hair stepped forward. She was Admiral Keen, leader of the Rebel Alliance. "You carry the last voice of Project Kestrel," she said. "Speak, so that we may remember." Selah stepped forward and raised the disc into the air. A beam of light shot out. A hologram appeared above the platform. It showed Walter standing in the cave, speaking into the recorder. "1 hour before the explosion, my name is Walter Harper. I am not a soldier. I am not a hero. I am just a man who said yes when someone begged for help." He paused, his eyes calm, his voice steady. "They told me I was too old, too slow, too late. But one girl changed everything." The recording showed flashes of Selah, of the prison ship, of John Harper's files, of the truth behind the breeding camps and the human names that protected them. When the message ended, no one spoke for a long moment. Then Admiral Keen raised her hand. "He will be remembered." The crowd repeated those words. "He will be remembered." Later that night, Selah walked alone through the base garden. Flowers from many worlds grew together under the warm lights. She stopped by a tall stone placed near the garden path. Carved into it were simple words, "Walter Harper. He gave everything." She placed her hand on the stone, her eyes full of tears, but her heart full of strength. A voice spoke behind her, deep and familiar. "He would not want you to cry." She turned and saw an older man with cybernetic legs and a soft smile. He introduced himself as Mikhail, one of the last surviving members of John Harper's original team. He told her stories of the past, of how they tried to stop the dark trade, of how Walter was never supposed to know, but always had the heart for it. Selah listened in silence, then spoke. "He was more than brave. He was kind." Mikhail nodded. "And now you must carry that forward." Selah looked at the stars, then at the disc in her hand. "Want to go back to Jurul. I want to show my people that humans still stand with us. You will not go alone. We will go with you." 1 week later, a rebel cruiser lifted from Earth. Inside were scientists, soldiers, healers, and Selah. She stood at the front of the bridge as the stars came closer. no fear only purpose. When they reached Jural, the sky was filled with shadows. Old machines still floated above her broken planet, but the signal she sent reached deep hidden. Survivors came out eyes wide with disbelief. Children looked at the ship with wonder. Old ones wept. Many still wore scars from chains. Sella stepped onto the surface with the disc in hand. She raised it and spoke. This is the voice of a human, not of war, but of heart. She played Walter's last message for all to hear. The people stood in silence. Then they raised their hands in the air, a gesture of unity, of hope. The disc was placed in the central tower of the Capitol ruins. A new name was carved beside it, Harper's Flame. From that day, Jural began to rebuild. More ships arrived. More bridges formed between worlds and across the galaxy. The name Walter Harper became a light in the dark, not just an old man, not just a forgotten soul, but a reason to believe again. And Sella, the girl who once fell into his arms, became a leader, keeper of truth, a voice for the lost, and a promise that kindness can shape the stars.